There's a PhD to be written, isn't there? I'm not going to do it, but you feel free. A PhD to be written on not just what it is that makes things matter to us, but what it is that makes that change. Because, of course, what mattered a year ago might be rather different from what mattered today, despite the fact that the situation on the ground or the things that made us care haven't actually gone away. We just care less. A form of emotional attrition almost. You just sort of chip away. I'm thinking of Ukraine and to a lesser extent Gaza. I think Gaza has come back round again with the increasingly irrefutable evidence of appalling conduct there. Ukraine has gone quiet for many of us, even though the fighting continues and the tensions remain at fever pitch. And, of course, the reason why it's back in the spotlight today has very little to do with what is happening on the ground in Ukraine and everything to do with the fact that Donald Trump is set to meet his hero in Alaska on Friday, Vladimir Putin, and seek, well, what exactly? A distraction from the continuing Epstein scandal back home in America, I suspect. I don't know that Donald Trump is in a position to do anything at all. 24 hours, was it? He said he'd have it fixed on the campaign trail. He'd have this war finished within on the first day back in power. And then he has a meeting and Vladimir Putin says things to him and he comes out doing a lap of honour, Donald Trump that is. And 10 minutes later, Vladimir Putin sends more missiles into Ukraine and makes an absolute mockery of whatever it was that Donald Trump thought that he had achieved in the first place. Excuse me. The bit I can't quite get my head around, even now, is the contempt with which he speaks of Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Not just, of course, the contempt with which he speaks about him, but the utter contempt with which he speaks to him. Most obviously when he turned up in the White House. The best way to understand this is to boil it down to almost primeval, atavistic behaviour. Donald Trump honestly believes that bullies should prevail. So that if the big boy at school demands your dinner money, then you are an idiot if you do not give it to him. I do think sometimes it can be that simple. You are an idiot if you do not give him your dinner money. If you go to the teacher to complain, you are an idiot. If you seek to muster together a group of friends that might be able to resist the bully, you are an idiot. If you do anything other than recognise the, quote, natural, end quote, order of things, then you are an idiot. I am bigger than you and I want all your money. Certainly, sir. Here it is. Because the clip from yesterday that I couldn't really get my head around was still, even now, having witnessed so much of it, was the bit about how Zelenskyy had got everything wrong. I can't believe he did what he did, said Trump. I'll find the clip for you in the next few minutes, or rather Eleanor will. But the idea that he looked at the illegal invasion of Ukraine by a murderous despot, a genocidal maniac, and decided that the people resisting it were the wrong uns in this piece. I think it's worth pausing here for a minute, isn't it? It's worth pausing here just for a nanosecond. You watch an illegal invasion of sovereign territory, which is expected to unfold almost seamlessly. They were expecting to have a Kremlin puppet installed in Kyiv by the end of that opening weekend. The scale and the strength of the Ukrainian resistance, I think, shocked everybody except Ukrainians, probably even shocked some of them. And Trump's position remains that Zelenskyy should have legged it, should have rolled over, should have bent, surrendered, acquiesced. And Trump, well, either can't forgive him for that or simply can't understand it, can't understand the defiance of that so-called natural order. And here we are now. Years later, 3 years later, give or take, here we are now looking at a changed map with Russian forces successfully repelled in the northeast of the country and still camped on the southeastern borders. Donetsk, it's still, and of course Crimea, which was already still under Russian control. And now Donald Trump turns up on Friday to tell Putin what? I don't even know. So what question do we ask today? I wonder whether the West has made a terrible mistake by leaving Donald Trump in charge. I wonder whether it should have been clearer. Whether or not we have the capacity to do it or not, I do not know. But I do know that the Financial Times reports this morning a tripling in speed of Europe's production of weapons. The weapons factories of Europe are expanding at 3 times the rate of peacetime. 7 million square metres of new industrial development that represents rearmament on a historic scale. It's gone into overdrive since that full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. The FT has looked at radar satellite data covering 150 facilities across 37 companies. This is a defence revival, the likes of which many thought we would never see. Most obviously that American historian Francis Fukuyama, who wrote about the end of history when the Berlin Wall came down, that liberalism had triumphed over communism and there was no way that we would ever return to the sort of standoff of the Cold War. This is not policy rhetoric or pledges. This is concrete and steel. And it comes as EU governments argue over how to sustain armed deliveries to Kyiv. And who here knows enough to answer the question of whether or not Europe has an inalienable moral duty to protect the Ukrainian people if Donald Trump decides to take his ball home, if Donald Trump continues upon a path of diminishing and diluting US support for Ukraine, continues upon a path of praising and sweet-talking Vladimir Putin while insulting and offending Volodymyr Zelenskyy and by association the entire Ukrainian people. I don't think it is an exaggeration to say that he blames Zelenskyy for the war. He blames Zelenskyy for the war. He said yesterday, and I've got the quote in front of me, that Zelenskyy didn't need to go into war and kill everybody. He blames Zelenskyy for the war. In fact, I think you should hear it in his own inimitable tone.
And I get along with Zelenskyy, but, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. But I'll be speaking to Zelenskyy. The next meeting will be with Zelenskyy and Putin, or Zelenskyy and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need. But I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders. I was a little bothered by the fact that Zelenskyy was saying, well, I have to get constitutional approval. I mean, he's got approval to go into war and kill everybody, but he needs approval to do a land swap because there'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad. But it's very complex because you have lines that are very uneven and there'll be some swapping, there'll be some changes in land, and the word that they will use is, they make changes. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine.
I mean, it's just... What an irredeemable idiot the man is. What's the worst thing in the world is a stupid person who's too stupid to realise how stupid they are. Thinks he's a genius. And of course, there are plenty of people who have also decided that he's a genius. I bet he can't name a single town in Ukraine. I bet he can't name a single region, a single city, a single politician beyond Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And there he is, blaming the leader of the invaded country for the resistance. How do you even put that into historical context? What would the equivalent be? Blaming Poland for the Nazi invasion? I don't know whether people did that at the time, whether they were sort of Lord Haw-Haws or apologists doing that kind of thing at the time, blaming Sudetenland for the annexation, blaming Poland for the invasion, blaming France. Did we blame the French when the Nazis marched on Paris? I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, truly incredible that you can look at the illegal invasion of a sovereign territory and have a problem not with the invader but with the resistance. And this is going to be dominating the news for the next few days. I think we're looking at a world now where Europe is aligning itself with Volodymyr Zelensky's Ukraine, Europe and Ukraine, and Donald Trump is aligning himself with Russia. I mean, I'm cautious of hyperbole, But if you are, and we may do some psychology today because we probably don't have the knowledge or the depth of knowledge to do detail. But if you are blaming the victim for acts of aggression, you are essentially facilitating, encouraging and abetting the offender, right? You are. I mean, if it's a bit like women getting blamed for being attacked because of what they were wearing or whatever ludicrous nonsense your average columnist or, in the old days, high court judges can come up with. You're blaming the victim for an attack, or worse, in fact, you're blaming a victim for retaliating after being attacked instead of just meekly accepting whatever fate it was that the aggressor had decided to mete out to you. It's breathtaking, right? And that is where we are now. A murderous maniac rampaging through sovereign territory with the most powerful man in the world, or the other most powerful man in the world, rubbing his hands with glee and blaming the person being attacked. The mind truly boggles. I mean, where do we go? How do we do this? Is that a fair question to ask, whether or not we're looking at Donald Trump? Even the Daily Mail reports Donald Trump heaped praise on Vladimir Putin yesterday as he confirmed Volodymyr Zelenskyy will not be invited to their meeting in Alaska on Friday. OK, what's the point of this meeting? I mentioned to you late last week that a very, very valued contributor to this programme, Anthony in Bletchley Park, had passed away last month. And it was on mornings like this that he, with his history of incredible work in military intelligence, you knew, didn't you, when you listened to him, that he was not telling us the full story about his qualifications to contribute to these conversations. But these were the mornings when he was of, inexpressible value to us. What is the point of this meeting? What is Trump hoping to get out of it? Do you agree with me that we are being a little bit mealy-mouthed about the reality, the real politic of the situation? It is Trump and Putin versus Ukraine and Europe. Do you agree with me? And whether you do or not, what does that mean? Your agreement or your disagreement, or the new truth? The new truth that the world order hasn't just been redrawn, it's been torn up and set on fire. I admire Vladimir Putin. I love Vladimir Putin. I used to be the apple of his eye. Donald Trump claiming in public that Vladimir Putin used to see him as the apple of his eye. It's borderline homoerotic, the way he talks about Vladimir Putin, and that's not a parallel I would draw often. But it's sick how he talks about him. It's as if he's there rubbing his thighs in excitement at the thought of Vladimir Putin murdering thousands of Ukrainians for the crime of having been born on soil that no longer belonged to Russia and, historically speaking, never should have done. And Volodymyr Zelenskyy, meanwhile, should never have done what he did, should never have resisted the attack. So talk to me about the events, both unfolding and unfolded, with a particular focus upon the This what's the point of this summit is the question I've got for you. And you can't answer nothing because they must think there's something in it for them. Putin, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court, just like Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, Putin waltzes into Alaska, shakes hands with Donald Trump. The message that sends back to Moscow is, Yarbu sucks to international law, and Yarbu sucks to war crime allegations, and Yarbu sucks to the International Criminal Court. But tragically, and for me at least still incredibly, that's not even unique on the globe at the moment. That's not even unique when it comes to allies or former enemies of the West. Incredible that Putin is able to do this in Alaska. What does that mean, that summit, that meeting? And yeah, I do want you to have a crack at this because I don't know if we can really go anywhere unless we understand this bit. Why does Trump blame Zelenskyy for this war? Okay, come at that either militarily, historically, or psychologically. Why does Donald Trump blame Volodymyr Zelenskyy for this war? He categorically does. He clearly does. He explicitly does, inarguably. I'm running out of adverbs. But why? Why does he blame Volodymyr Zelenskyy? What does it say about either him, about the situation, about Vladimir Putin, about the war, about international... How do we sit here still wriggling without focusing upon the single most important element of this whole hideous saga, which is... There it is. I blame the victim. Why does he do that? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. In fact, forgive me, in many ways that's the question I most want you to answer. I don't know that anyone can have a crack, and this is a challenge, by the way, not an admission of defeat. I don't know that anyone's got anything particularly illuminating to say about what this summit is for, but you never stop surprising me, so that question remains on the board. What the hell is this summit for? And then the second bit, very simply, is why does he blame the victim, not the aggressor? Why?